Imagine a monster. What do you see? Fangs, claws, a hulking, grotesque figure emerging from the shadows? Now, imagine that monster with a dazzling smile, captivating eyes, and the kind of charm that could disarm anyone. Imagine him as your neighbor, your friend, even the man you loved. What if the most terrifying evil didn't lurk in the dark, but walked among us, cloaked in charisma and utterly devoid of a conscience? Tonight, we delve into the true story of Ted Bundy, a man who shattered our perceptions of evil, leaving a trail of unimaginable horror and a chilling legacy that continues to haunt America. This isn't just a crime story, it's a deep dive into the psychology of a predator, the failures of a system, and the enduring question, how do we truly identify a monster? In the quiet, often idyllic landscape of 1970s America, a darkness began to stir, a shadow that would stretch across multiple states and forever etch itself into the annals of true crime. This shadow had a name, Ted Bundy. To understand the profound impact and enduring horror of Ted Bundy's crimes, we must first peel back the layers of his carefully constructed facade to examine not just what he did, but who he appeared to be. Born Theodore Robert Cowell in Burlington, Vermont in 1946, Ted Bundy's early life was shrouded in a complex web of deception. He was raised by his grandparents, believing his mother, Louise Cowell, was his older sister. The truth that Louise was his birth mother and his grandparents his adoptive parents was a secret that Bundy reportedly only fully uncovered in his late teens. This foundational lie, this inherent deceit at the core of his identity, is often cited by psychologists and biographers as a potential contributor to his later pathological tendencies, fostering a sense of resentment, detachment, and an inability to compartmentalize reality. Despite these hidden complexities, Bundy presented a remarkably normal image to the world. He was handsome, intelligent, and articulate. He excelled in certain academic areas, developing a keen interest in psychology and later law. His early adult life saw him involved in Republican politics, even working on Nelson Rockefeller's presidential campaign. He volunteered at a suicide crisis hotline, a detail that, in retrospect, sends shivers down the spine. The very act of offering solace and empathy to those in despair while harboring such profound depravity speaks volumes about his capacity for manipulation and his utter devoid of a conscience. He was a master chameleon, able to blend seamlessly into any environment, projecting an image of trustworthiness and normalcy that allowed him to move undetected, right under the noses of his unsuspecting victims and the authorities. The methodical unraveling of Ted Bundy's public persona and the horrifying revelation of his true nature began in the early to mid-1970s. The timeline of his confirmed murders is generally understood to have commenced around 1974, primarily in the Pacific Northwest, specifically Washington state. However, the exact number of his victims remains a source of grim speculation. Bundy confessed to 30 murders, but investigators and experts widely believe the true count to be significantly higher, perhaps in the dozens, spanning across Washington, Oregon, Utah, Colorado, and Florida. His method of operation was terrifyingly consistent, yet adaptable. He often used his charm to lure young women, sometimes feigning injury, asking for help, or impersonating authority figures. He would then abduct them, typically leading them to secluded locations where he would commit unspeakable acts of violence. The sheer audacity and frequency of his attacks created a climate of fear that permeated college campuses and communities throughout the West. Young women disappeared without a trace, leaving behind distraught families and baffled law enforcement agencies. The absence of a clear physical profile or a consistent pattern of attack, beyond the fact that his victims were almost exclusively young, attractive women with long hair parted in the middle, initially hampered investigations. Bundy's ability to travel across state lines, to change his appearance slightly, and to exploit the jurisdictional challenges between different police forces allowed him to evade capture for far too long. One of the earliest and most infamous series of disappearances occurred in Washington state, particularly around Seattle and the surrounding areas. The disappearance of Linda Ann Healy, a University of Washington student, in February 1974, is often considered the first confirmed Bundy victim. Her case, along with those of Donna Gale Manson, Susan Elaine Rancourt, Roberta Parks, Brenda Carroll Ball, and Georgianne Hawkins, among others, painted a chilling picture of an unseen predator. Witnesses began to report seeing a man fitting a general description, attractive, driving a Volkswagen Beetle, near the locations where women disappeared. This Volkswagen, often a distinctive beige color, became an ominous symbol of the terror that gripped the region. As law enforcement struggled to connect the dots across multiple jurisdictions, Bundy continued his rampage. He moved to Utah in the summer of 1974, ostensibly to attend law school at the University of Utah. This relocation did not halt his murderous activities. If anything, it signaled an expansion of his hunting grounds. Debbie Kent, Melissa Smith, and Laura Amy were among the young women who vanished or were murdered during his time in Utah.
The striking similarities in the victims, young, attractive, usually college-aged, and often last seen alive near campuses or public areas, began to solidify the terrifying realization that a serial killer was operating. The first significant break in the case came not from a direct capture during a murder, but from a seemingly innocuous traffic stop. In August 1975, in Granger, Utah, a state trooper pulled over Ted Bundy, who was driving his Volkswagen Beetle. Inside the car, the officer found an array of suspicious items: a ski mask, a crowbar, rope, handcuffs, and other tools commonly associated with abductions. Though Bundy offered plausible, albeit flimsy, explanations, the officer's suspicions were piqued. This stop led to his first arrest, not for murder, but for aggravated kidnapping related to the abduction of Carol Duranche, who had bravely escaped his clutches earlier that year. Duranche's harrowing testimony, detailing how a man posing as a police officer had attempted to abduct her, was crucial in linking Bundy to at least one of the many disappearances. Bundy's subsequent trial for the Duranche kidnapping in Utah provided a terrifying glimpse into his manipulative prowess. He insisted on representing himself for portions of the trial, a strategy that allowed him to directly engage with witnesses and, perhaps more importantly, to exert a degree of control over the proceedings. He was ultimately convicted and sentenced to 1 to 15 years. However, his legal troubles were far from over. As he served his time in Utah, investigators in Colorado began to connect him to other disappearances and murders in their state, most notably the murder of Karen Campbell. It was during his transfer to Colorado to face murder charges that Bundy demonstrated another terrifying facet of his character, his cunning ability to escape. In December 1977, while awaiting trial in Aspen, Colorado, he exploited a gap in security. He requested to visit the law library to prepare his defense, a privilege granted to him due to his status as a law student representing himself. During this visit, he jumped from a second-story window of the courthouse and fled into the surrounding mountains. The immediate search was intense, but Bundy, utilizing his knowledge of the wilderness and his capacity for evasion, managed to disappear for several days. He was eventually recaptured, but his brief taste of freedom was a harbinger of things to come. His second and far more infamous escape occurred just a few months later. After being recaptured, Bundy was transferred to the Garfield County Jail in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, a facility considered more secure. Yet, even behind bars, his mind was ceaselessly working on a plan. On the night of December 30th, 1977, Bundy meticulously sawed a hole in the ceiling of his cell, climbed through the attic, navigated the ventilation system, and dropped into a jailer's apartment, where he changed clothes and simply walked out the front door. This escape was an astonishing feat, highlighting his unwavering determination and his ability to exploit weaknesses in security systems designed to hold him. With this second escape, Ted Bundy vanished, and the manhunt intensified dramatically, becoming a nationwide alert. He was no longer just a suspected serial killer, he was a known escape artist, a ghost in the wind. For several weeks, Bundy lived under the radar, committing burglaries to sustain himself, and then, inevitably, he gravitated towards a new hunting ground, a place where he believed he could start afresh: Florida. The tranquil college town of Tallahassee, Florida, was about to become the scene of Bundy's most brazen and brutal attack. In the early hours of January 15, 1978, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. What followed was a night of unspeakable terror. He bludgeoned and strangled 4 young women. Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman were brutally murdered, and Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler were severely beaten and injured. The savagery of the attack shocked the nation, not just for its brutality, but for the audacity of attacking multiple victims in a populated sorority house. The murders sent a wave of panic through the university community and across the country. Just hours after the Chi Omega attack, Bundy continued his rampage, breaking into another off-campus residence and attacking Cheryl Thomas, another FSU student, who survived with severe injuries. The sheer speed and proximity of these attacks underscored the escalating violence and desperation of the fugitive. Bundy's reign of terror in Florida culminated in the abduction and murder of Kimberly Leach, a 12-year-old schoolgirl, on February 9, 1978. Her disappearance and subsequent discovery of her remains weeks later solidified the horrifying understanding that the monster who had terrorized the West Coast had now brought his particular brand of evil to the Southeast. Finally, in February 1978, after weeks of relentless pursuit, Ted Bundy was apprehended for the final time in Pensacola, Florida, following a traffic stop by a police officer who noticed his stolen vehicle. His capture brought a collective sigh of relief, but it also ushered in a new, equally harrowing phase: the trials. Bundy's trials in Florida for the Chi Omega murders and the murder of Kimberly Leach were highly publicized spectacles, captivating and horrifying audiences across America. Once again, Bundy attempted to exert control, often acting as his own attorney, cross-examining witnesses, and even delivering his own opening statements and closing arguments. He maintained an unsettling composure, a veneer of normalcy that often conflicted with the horrific testimonies and evidence presented against him. His intellect and charm, which he had used so effectively to lure victims, were now on full display in the courtroom, but this time they were met with revulsion. The forensic evidence presented was overwhelming. Dental impressions taken from Bundy matched bite marks found on the body of Lisa Levy, a crucial piece of evidence in an era before widespread DNA analysis. The testimonies of the surviving Chi Omega victims, Kathy Kleiner and Karen Chandler, who vividly recalled the terrifying attack, were pivotal. The prosecution meticulously built its case, presenting a chilling narrative of a calculating and utterly remorseless killer. In July 1979, Ted Bundy was convicted of the Chi Omega murders and sentenced to death. A separate trial for the murder of Kimberly Leach followed, resulting in another death sentence in January 1980. These convictions brought a measure of justice to the victims and their families, but the emotional scars left by Bundy's actions ran deep. The legal battles, however, were far from over. Bundy spent years on death row, appealing his convictions multiple times. During this period, he became a subject of intense psychological study and public fascination. He granted numerous interviews, offering insights, albeit often self-serving and manipulative ones, into his criminal mind. These interviews, particularly his later conversations with journalists and investigators, offered a chilling window into the mind of a psychopath, a man who could analyze his own actions with a detached academic curiosity, seemingly devoid of remorse or empathy for the immense suffering he had caused. He spoke of the urge, the compulsion, the separation between his public persona and his darkest desires. These interviews would later form the basis of various documentaries and books, most famously Netflix's Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, which revealed the chilling reality of how a seemingly normal individual could harbor such profound evil, and how his manipulative charm allowed him to evade detection and capture for so long. He was the embodiment of the terrifying truth that monsters don't always look like monsters. They can be the charming, educated, and outwardly respectable individuals we encounter every day.
Throughout his time on death row, as his execution date drew nearer, Bundy began to confess to more murders, offering details and locations that helped bring closure to some of the families of his earlier victims. These confessions, while providing valuable information, were also viewed with a degree of skepticism by some, seen as a final attempt to manipulate the system or prolong his life. Finally, after years of appeals and legal maneuvers, Ted Bundy's time ran out. On January 24, 1989, he was executed by electric chair at Florida State Prison. Outside the prison, crowds had gathered, a testament to the profound public impact of his crimes and the collective desire for justice. Their cheers and celebrations as news of his execution spread marked the end of a terrifying chapter in American history. The legacy of Ted Bundy is multifaceted and enduring. For the families of his victims, it is a legacy of immeasurable pain, loss, and the eternal ache of what was stolen. For law enforcement, his case revolutionized investigative techniques, highlighting the critical need for interagency cooperation, the importance of forensic evidence, and the development of psychological profiling in serial killer cases. For society at large, Bundy forced us to reevaluate how we perceive danger, shattering the illusion that evil is always easily recognizable. He became a cautionary tale, a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that true malevolence can hide behind the most attractive and intelligent of facades. Ted Bundy's story continues to fascinate and horrify, not because of any glorification of his actions, but because it confronts us with fundamental questions about human nature, the origins of evil, and the terrifying vulnerabilities of society. His case remains a chilling testament to the fact that some of the most dangerous predators are not the ones lurking in the shadows, but the ones who can walk among us unnoticed until it is too late. The monster within often looks just like us. This historical account is a reminder that while justice was ultimately served, the echoes of Ted Bundy's reign of terror continue to resonate, urging us to be vigilant, to learn from the past, and to forever remember the victims whose lives were tragically cut short by a man who defied all conventional understanding of a killer. If you're drawn to real stories of American mystery and the unsettling truths that history sometimes hides, be sure to subscribe to American Mystery Vault. Don't miss out on more true crime stories and historical accounts that the history books can't forget. Hit that subscribe button and join our community.